Sehr. Mighty, komm. Ja, schön euch zu sehen. Herzlich willkommen bei Each One Teach One EOTO. Mein Name ist Nadia Al-Azhar. Ich bin Teil der Geschäftsführung bei EOTO. Neben mir meine geschätzte Kollegin Mighty Monet, die kaufmännische Leitung. Hallo. Hallo. Ja, heute ist... Okay, we're going to switch to English right now. I thought I could start and then switch. All right. So let me start from the top. Hello and welcome. It's nice to see you. It's nice to have you. My name is Nadia Al-Azhar, and I'm co-director of Each One Teach One EOTO. So I'm the CEO, and next to me my CFO, Mighty Monet.
Even in English, the name is the same.
It's the same. Yeah, so today, important day, International Day Against Racism. And this is also the day that 10 years ago, EOTO, then in a smaller format, in a smaller space, opened firstly the doors to its library, which was then located in Müllerstraße, not too far from here. So we are staying true to Wedding, we are staying true to the African Quarter, and I'm really pleased that you are here for the Day of the Open Door of EOTO, and now the event, the preview of the English version, the English translation of the Afrozensus. I'm really thrilled and looking forward to this event. Mighty, do you want to say something?
Welcome everybody. We are happy to have you, and hopefully you're going to enjoy the seminar, workshop,
conference. Yeah, same here. We're going to get out of the way and hand over to the COMPAT team. COMPAT stands for Kompetenzzentrum, Kompetenznetzwerk Anti-Schwarzer Rassismus, so the Competence Network Anti-Black Racism. Please make sure so that we can keep you posted on everything we are doing. Sign the sheets here, you know, leave your email address, sign up for our newsletter so we can keep you posted. There is a bunch of EOTO publications that you should really help yourself to. And then after this event, we're going to do a tour through the future community center that we are developing, and then there will be a bite to eat. So let's go. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you. Good to have you. Thank you for coming and joining us. As our MDs just explained, we have a special event for you today. We are Magda and Angelo. We are the project leads of the COMPAT and responsible for this event. So if it goes well, we are responsible. If it doesn't, we're not, basically. And we are very happy to welcome you here because this is a very special event for us. Just maybe some points on the COMPAT itself. So the COMPAT is a federal project, which means that we are working in like all over the country, basically. Each One Teach One is one part of it, and the other one is the ISD, which is the Initiative of Black Germans. We have our office here in Berlin, obviously, and we have like each of us has a different focus. Our focus, for example, is research and education, and we do different things in the scope of these two topics. One of these things was the translation of the Afrozensus, which we were busy with all of last year, basically. And we kind of thought about how do we want to like make sure that people get access, and how do we like present it and just use it as a very important impulse to many important discussions. So that's why we're here today, because we figured we just want to give it kind of like a launch in conjunction with a few other things. But I'm going to tell you how the day is going to look like specifically today at a later point. So like I said, this was one of the things that we were busy with last year, and I want to specifically thank Tata, who's the translator of this very, very, very special publication. Translating things such as this is very complicated simply because terms in English, terms in German, there's just so many differences. So we are very happy that he really took his time and energy to make this all possible for us. Yeah.
I would continue now with mentioning briefly the history of the Afrozensus. We also have guests here, attendees here, who were a crucial part of putting this into existence. We have two people of the research and author team, Teresa and Muna, who will also say something about the Afrozensus in a short time and will also be part of the panel. I also saw Helene, who's the illustrator who basically put the Afrozensus into being with such beautiful illustrations. Thank you that you're here. Cedric is also here. I saw you entering. I don't see you now, but there you are. Yeah. Cedric is our data analyst who has been also working closely with us during the process of the translation, but also with the former Afrozensus team. So it's also like really nice to have several people who were part of this process in the same space right now. So thank you for being here and being part of this event. So the Afrozensus, for those people of you who don't know, was a survey, actually the first nationwide survey which tried to capture empirically the interconnections between Black history and also Black presence in Germany. The survey was conducted in 2020. The report got published in 2021. You hear it was a very, very short time, but the people who were part of it like put all their lifetime basically during that time. I especially hear two people laughing here at the front into putting this very crucial and very big report into being. So we are very excited to kind of also commemorate this moment with all of you today. Yeah, thank you again. And as our CEO Nadia mentioned, we crucially wanted to do this event today during the day against racial discrimination because we try with this report, with the English version, to also foster transnational dialogues, transnational connections. There are so many communities in other countries of Europe, but also outside of Europe, who are trying also to foster dialogue on the importance of equity data. And we want to try with this event, that's why we also have guests from other countries here today, to kind of see what kind of connections do we have between Black activism in Germany regarding equity data, and also to struggle for conducting such surveys outside of Germany. And it's not just the Day Against Racism today. We are also in the final year of the UN Decade for People of African Descent. So I would even say, or we would even say, that this report can also stand symbolically for what Black communities have been fighting for the past 10 years in Germany. They've been crucially, or we've been crucially, trying to push this decade into a political product, into a political being. We can discuss if the German government was successful enough in it, but I would definitely like to point out the importance of Black communities during the past 10 years who've been trying to foster dialogue, who've been trying to foster social movements around the topics around anti-Black racism in Germany. And I think one example is especially the survey, which can be like seen as a huge milestone in the German history of anti-racism. Last but not least, we would also like to remember a crucial person who passed away last week in Berlin, Biplab Basu. We want to remember him today. As I said, he passed away last week, and we cannot talk about the organized struggle against racist police violence in Germany without mentioning Biplab. The founder of the anti-racist campaign KOP and the Counseling Center for Victims of Racist Violence Reach Out was a central anti-racist voice and force, not only in Berlin but nationwide and transnationally. Many people know Biplab from demonstrations, court hearings, where he always supported victims of racist police violence, or from networking meetings where he often was a mentor for younger comrades. Biplab, we will never forget your warm nature and passion for a fairer world, and let us please now hold a moment of silence for him. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Magda. So I want to say a little bit about what happens today. As you saw, we just greeted you, we just introduced ourselves. But at the same time, we are about to hand over the microphone to two people that were very essential that worked on the Afrozensus to just give you a little bit of insight on the history, basically how it came into place. And then after that, we're going to hand over to Elisabeth Kaneza, who thankfully will run our today's podium discussion, panel discussion, which is kind of the central thing for today. After that, there will be the opportunity for you to network a little bit and exchange ideas, email addresses, experiences whatsoever. So feel free to stay a little bit after, I think roughly until 7 p.m. And we also have some snacks and a few drinks for those who want to do that. Maybe some technical aspects. As you probably noticed, this microphone doesn't actually produce sound, at least in this room. This microphone is supposed to produce sound in the live stream, so please don't be confused as to why we keep speaking into these things. That that's what it's for. So, for example, if we have the question round later or something, please don't try to find the actual button. This is what's happening right now, okay? That's one of the things. Then also a very warm welcome to the people in the live stream. Thankfully, we have Femi today from our team who's supporting the live stream, who's also making sure that, yes, please. Who's also making sure that if there are questions in the live stream, for example, that you can feel free to post them there and he's going to respond to them, and make sure that you get all the information that you need. And maybe if we have some breaks, for example, he will also provide you with some tiny questionnaires in the chat, so feel free to stay engaged. And then also I want to give another shout out to Rosita, who is our coordination, who was very key in organizing this event. Thank you, Rosita. And I assume everybody of you had contact with Rosita. So that is very, very, very important to us to mention. Yeah, I think so far that's all on our list. I guess the last thing is obviously we said launch of the English edition. There are still some final tweaks to make, but we can at least launch the final English preview of the Afrozensus, which is the first chapters. For those in the live stream, Femi is going to post the link into the chat there. For everyone who's here who wants to have a look at it, we do have a tablet in the back on the table, so feel free to just go there and swipe through if that is something that you need to do because you don't speak German, for example, or your English is better. Okay, with that being said, I would love to hand over to Teresa and Monish, and thank you all for coming again.
Okay, I hope I will get used to this thing not making sound. Thank you for inviting us today. We are Teresa and Monish. As already mentioned, we were part of the team who conducted and co-wrote the Afrozensus in 2020 and 2021. And when we were asked to be here today and to speak on the genesis of Afrozensus, I was like, okay, that's a huge topic because most of the things that happened, which ultimately led to Afrozensus, I wasn't part of. Monish was, but also if you look way back into history, I wasn't even born. So I was like, okay, we have to interview also a few people. And who's missing today is Kwesi Akins and Daniel Jamara, who were also part of the team. But Daniel is taking a well-deserved rest on the continent, like he's on vacation. And Kwesi is in India working, but they sent their warmest greetings. They would have loved to be here, but today you will have to put up with us. And yeah, as I said, when we met to discuss what we're going to share, what we're going to tell you, it was like, okay, where to start, because there are so many different levels and entry points to the Afrozensus. Hello. Hi. Like the very personal ones, but also the historic ones, and also all the immediate points which led to Afrozensus in the end, but we will talk about that in a minute. And I think we should first zoom out a little bit, because when I started working on the Afrozensus, when Daniel called me to work on the Afrozensus, I was in a postpartum phase. My child was 6 weeks old, and he got me on the phone and was like, we're doing the Afrozensus, are you gonna work with us? And I was like, what exactly is it? And what am I supposed to do? And for me, the Afrozensus was this great experience because I hadn't much connection to the Black community and so on. And for me, like, I didn't only put my work into it, but I also gained a lot from working with Monish, Daniel, and Kwesi, but also being in contact, like working for Yoto, being in contact with a lot of people who also um, who also have been active in the black movements in Germany for a long time. So it was really a privilege to be there. And during that time, I also learned that there, in 1996, I was 5 years old. How old were you in 1996? Also child, huh? 7. There was this first attempt, or the first self-organized survey on the social and economic position of black people in Germany. It was self-organized by DeZIM and the Initiative for Black People in Germany. And this was like the first time somebody tried to quantify the experience, because we had all those reports and records about black life in Germany, like also through arts and poems and literally everything you find here in this room also. But this was like the first attempt to really quantify it. But it was like self-organized. There were I think, limited funds. So the Afrozensus is really like a milestone and it's happened like 1996 to 2020. It's 14 or 24 years? 14 years. So it took a lot of time to be really also acknowledged on an administrative, on a political basis, to really have also the support, the financial support to conduct this survey. And there's also on the first pages of Afrozensus, there's also a take on that and a little example of how ADEFRA and ESD promoted the survey, which is quite similar to the wording we used later to promote our survey.
While not knowing that it is there. We
Yeah.
didn't, we find later we wanted to publish that there is this piece where we, in this library, I think, we could find that they tried in 1996, which is almost a quarter century, like it's, 24 years. So it's amazing how long it sometimes takes. The Afrozensus, as already Magda mentioned, also took in or happened while the UN Decade for People of African Descent. And also it was linked to a lot of different developments across the Atlantic, such as the Black Census, which inspired also this project a lot, and the Afrobarometer, a Pan-African research network on the continent. And so it wasn't that easy to find a name because Black Census was taken, Afrobarometer were like, don't know. So in the end we came up with Afrozensus. A lot of people were thinking like, you count in people of African descent? We're like, no, we try to count the experiences of these people. So what's central for the Afrozensus is that it's a community-based project, which is not just designed and implemented by the community for the community, but also happened in these different movements and contexts, nationally, but also internationally. So we wanted to highlight a few movements during the Afrozensus period, or movements happening when we were doing the Afrozensus, and some unforeseen events, especially in 2020. For example, the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, which was a really, really challenging time, especially because my son is a day younger than, no, the other way around. Your son is a day younger than my son. So we were both breastfeeding and having 2 little babies, and then doing the project management of this huge project for all these different communities with all these different needs, and then also in home office. So it was quite challenging. Especially it was challenging because it closed a lot of spaces. We needed to also reach out to people. We couldn't reach a lot of groups, a lot of communities anymore. So the major part of our outreach became like social media and like online platforms and so on. Another very important event or I don't even know if we could call it event, is the racist massacre in Hanau in February 2020, which underscored like the impact of racism and taking 9 lives and also shaking all our communities to their core. So it also like the whole phase was heated, and then also the murder of George Floyd in May 2020. So while we were designing this survey for the Black communities and also Black and people of color communities, a lot of things were happening and moving, and we also really want to center the things we were trying to implement with quantifying the experiences in these movements. So the Afrocensus emerged as a collective responsibility. We tried to tie it a lot, community consultations, and still challenged by the pandemic, still to find ways to have discussions and meetings and town halls, etc. So yeah, it is also a lot of collective effort. So it's not just one organization or team, but these are different movements and different community efforts. All like what we're trying to say is it's one step, and this step is based and within the continuation of ongoing struggle for justice for Black and brown people, and these movements have been decades and centuries and in the making, and this is just a small piece of it. Since Chrissy and Daniel are not here, we were thinking to tie in some of their work they have been doing for many years before we came to this project, and to highlight a bit the journey they were telling us about the Afrocensus also. So it has, as I said, it's set it in this communities, efforts and movements, but there were also several key experiences and key steps in this broader pattern beyond individual perspectives, of course. So yeah, still to highlight a few, one significant moment occurred approximately 20 years ago during the negotiations for the Allgemeine Gleichbehandlungsgesetz. What is the English word for it actually?
Do you know it? Allgemeines Gleichbehandlungsgesetz?
Pardon? General Equal Treatment Act in Germany, prompted by EU directive, and as part of an initiative for Black Germans delegation, and also many other organizations, also churches involved. They all emphasized the need for differentiated data. And the resistance was always like officials suggesting that the existence of such data, like quantifying Black people's experience, might lead to negative outcomes akin to genocide and the German history, etc. So this threat was like, it had this dismissive attitude towards the possibility to collect such data. So it is also a challenging context within the German history. Another pivotal step is the submission of the report to the UN committee, the UN Anti-Racism Convention from Germany by the Liga for Human Rights, Liga für Menschenrechte, authored by Black scholar Jonas Andreas, and this report led to the acknowledgement the first time that Black people in Germany are considered as a vulnerable group, and beyond just saying people with migration background. So this recognition also paved the way for advocating specific consideration and funding for Black people in Germany. So and then, as we mentioned already, the UN Decade for People of African Descent, and then the ADS, Anti-Discrimination.
Federal Agency
Yeah.
for Anti-Discrimination.
Thank you. The Federal Agency for Anti-Discrimination established a call for application for projects researching anti-black racism, and that's like where EU2 like built on all the community efforts before to write this, to apply for this.
So as you see, there was like a lot of like also lobbying in a positive sense going on, like putting pressure on governments, on administrations to take this seriously, the request for being able to collect this data. And finally, Kwesi and also Daniel managed to, and also you were part of submitting the request, huh?
And many other.
And many others.
Usually, yeah.
To submit the request at the Federal Agency for Anti-Discrimination on a proposal for research on anti-black racism. But this also, it wasn't that easy. There were challenges for the applicants, since like one major hurdle was the absence of a black faculty or professorship, and also the lack of generally specific calls for proposals for quantitative surveys on anti-black racism. So this also raised the question, okay, how are we going to do it, but also who's going to do it? And in the end, it was clear that like we talked about the German history and how it's not an easy field to navigate data collection on the experience of black people. So it was necessary to also gain trust within the communities, to be able to assure them that no harm is going to be, no harm.
Do no harm principle?
Yes, like a do no harm principle, that the data is not going to be misused in a way. So this is why it was crucial that communities organizations such as EOTO was able to get the fundings for the survey, because if you imagine if this data was being collected from like an official or federal agency, this could have raised questions. And so this was important to be closer to the people who really were concerned by the survey.
And it did also still raise questions within our own communities, why also a black organization should collect this data. So it was a lot of also to offer safer spaces where we really tried to be transparent, and also asked a lot, what should we ask? What do you want to be asked? And so on.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, thank you. And then there was the other part that Daniel at that time, he was board member of EOTO, but he was also working at Citizens for Europe, where we had the data team part of the whole thing, because we were conducting a survey, a quantitative survey, and we needed infrastructure and access to not only draft the questionnaire, but also have in the end we decided to do an online survey to implement everything and also be able to analyze the data. And as Munish mentioned before, when all of this took place, we had some other challenges during the project, like being hit by the pandemic, being honestly also underfunded for such a project, because you have to imagine, it's not the first time any type of data was collected, but it was the first time through a quantitative survey. And we put a lot of pressures on ourselves, but also from the communities. There were a lot of different interests and needs, and we were like, okay, this is a one in a lifetime moment. Now is the moment. We have the money, we have the team, we have this time frame, we have the communities, everything comes together, and we had the pressure to really capture everything, because we didn't know when this was going to happen again. And this is also the state we're in now. We don't know when it's going to happen again. So when we thought about what we're going to do, we were like, okay, if we have 500 participants, Black, African, Afro-diasporic people in the survey, and then we write an 80-page report, and then that's it. And in the end, we had an almost 400-page report. Almost 6,000 Black, African, and Afro-diasporic people participated, which is great. It's awesome. It's yeah, it was really impressive. But also, we also had all this data. Like we weren't talking about 500 people anymore. We were talking about almost 6,000, and also, yeah, then seeing who participated and what are the subgroups. What do we want to tell about them? It was a lot of work.
Yeah, a really high workload. And it's also like because we wanted to do right, like to make it right. So it's like the pressure of the moment also was like really hard to handle till the end, till we published it. And then also still now I'm like, okay, this really happened. Like, yeah.
Yes. No, but speaking of
yeah, so we will try now to after trying briefly to summarize what the different contexts were and so on, to give you some ideas of the study design. So we had two objectives, like two central premises of the Afrocensus. One was Black communities are diverse. We need to make sure they are diverse, and at the same time they have shared experiences. Where also like the second goal comes in, the anti-Black racism is specific, a specific experience of Black people, and we wanted to capture this. And yeah, these were the two main focuses we had. And then we were talking a lot about that it's quantifying experiences, but we also wanted to use the knowledge which is already there, and the knowledge production which was before the Afrocensus and which the Afrocensus is based on, and also did interviews and focus group discussions and so on. So in the end, it's a more mixed method analysis. And though we had to, because we did not have enough funding to like go deeper into each topic, so we asked the communities which topic you care, like which are very urgent for you, and this is health and education. So these are the two major topics. We could also analyze in a mixed method analysis, like the quantitative experiences of the 6,000 people, plus the interviews and focus group discussions and so on. So we were limited by time and money and so on. Otherwise, I remember the first draft we were making, we were like, okay, we will go into policing, we will go into this, and we will go into that, and then in the end, like crying, oh no, we have to choose two. And but I think these are two also very central ones, and also seeing how the impact, especially on the health chapter of the Afrocensus, to see also in other in academia and so on. It's really, it's we're happy that we could also provide some on this.
Yeah, you already touched on methodologies. So this was the methodological approach, like interweaving quantitative and qualitative analysis, and also within the theoretic approach, we adhere to critical emancipatory based on Black and African feminist and decolonial approaches. So this was also like this standard we wanted to hold, like we are doing research in a new way, like we are a Black core team, we are we are doing research on Black topics, so what are the theoretic approaches we wanna draw from? And also I was speaking of gaining trust, like we also had to adhere to some principles how to collect equality and anti-discrimination data. And I will list them. One is, for example, self-identification. This is why the sample we got in the end was like, we didn't go around and knock on doors and we're like, maybe this person is African, Black, or Afro-diasporic, but we worked tightly with different Black communities, and we told them to please share about the survey, and then people could decide for themselves whether they self-identified as Black, African, and Afro-diasporic, and then they could take part and also tell their families, their communities, their friends. Another principle to ethically collect anti-discrimination equality data is voluntary participation, which is also connected to self-identification. So nobody was forced, also nobody gained like financially from participating in the survey. And there has to be clarity about the purpose of data collection, which is also in this realm of gaining trust. This is why, for example, it wasn't only like drafting the questionnaire and preparing the focus groups, but also like doing a lot of reach out and a lot of like getting in contact with communities, with people, explaining what are we doing, why are we doing this, also trying to address all the concerns which were connected with it. We had to ensure anonymity of respondents. Schneller machen. Maybe I will touch on that later again on the panel. Yeah, I think maybe this is something also for the panel. I think we will touch on that. Okay, so in the end, what was the impact of the Afrozensus? What did we achieve? Like I already said, like almost 6,000 people participated, and a direct impact was that we could show, like, I think we could end the discussion on whether anti-Black racism is a thing or not, because this report shows, like, there are specific experiences Black, African, and Afro-diasporic people make in the German context, but which is also connected to a global context. And it was really important to show that, not only to show, like, federal ministries or the government or whatever, like, this is also an important outcome, like to be able to show this in data, but not only like outwards, but also inwards, to like to give us as Black people a conscientization on this is what is happening to us, or this is how diverse we are, but also this is what is happening to us, and this is structural. Like, it's not something which is isolated and is like which only happens to me as an individual, but it's like a collective experience. And by quantifying and those experiences and knowledges, we could create this feeling of validation of individual experiences.
Yeah, it's some sort of mirror for our own communities, also to see our engagement and also different strategies we have for empowerment, etc. We want to close with a few notes on the future, because many people have been asking for when is going to happen the next one and so on. So what should be important is to even make more clear that we need to have better ways to collect data to show the diverse experience, because the Afrozensus still captures also some groups and not other groups within the Black communities. And so it's very important that we focus on the agency engagement and community work and positive contribution we're making. So we have been talking many times about an Afrozensus on empowerment strategies, for example. So of course, it's still important to address anti-Black racism and intersectional discrimination, and to highlight Black agency and resilience in that context. So, yeah.
I think this is a nice closing word.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving us this insight and overview into the genesis of Afrozensus, but also the work, the sacrifices, and also, of course, the visions you have. So thank you very much for your work, personally. Dear guests, dear friends, it's now my pleasure and honor to welcome you to the launch of the English edition of Afrozensus here in the beautiful premises of Each One Teach One. We are launching the English edition of the Afrozensus today, but today is also an important day because it marks the International Day Against Racial Discrimination. And it's a key annual observation of the United Nations, which provides the following background of this day. I quote, "The International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination is observed annually on the day the police in Sharpeville, South Africa, opened fire and killed 69 people at a peaceful demonstration against apartheid, passed law in 1960. In 1979, the General Assembly adopted a program of activities to be undertaken during the second half of the decade for action to combat racism and racial discrimination. And on that occasion, the General Assembly decided that a week of solidarity with the peoples struggling against racism and racial discrimination, beginning on 21st March, will be organized annually in all states. And I wish to highlight this because when we talk about the International Day Against Racial Discrimination, it's not just a day we meet and say, it's good that we're fighting, but it's also that we remember lives were lost, massacres, and it's ongoing, the struggle of Black people worldwide. And I'm especially delighted by the fact that the 2024 theme of the International Day Against Racial Discrimination is actually as followed: a decade of recognition, justice and development, namely implementing the International Decade for People of African Descent. And it refers to the decade which is ending this year and which was started by the United Nations in 2015. So however, although the decade was a big milestone for the rights of people of African descent, we have to say very clearly, especially on this day, that while the decade contributed to progress, many countries, and especially single states in Europe, have been slow in implementing the decade and its recommendations. In countries where governments have taken steps to recognize the decade, we can observe that this is thanks to the tireless engagement of Black communities and their political demands. This is also the case for Germany. The decade was launched in 2016 as a result of the efforts of communities, and it was not until February 2022 that the government put in place a coordination unit and an advisory board tasked with implementation of the decade. I stand before you as one of the members of the advisory board. And while it's been a long time coming for many of us who have worked for many years, some even for decades, as we have heard, for anti-Black racism and racial discrimination to be recognized and dealt with in Germany, I wish to say that we are now in a better place. And we have newfound momentum to promote the rights of people of African descent, as also the Afrozensus has shown. And the decade has been and is still an important framework to support black communities, and it also addresses the state as duty bearer in international human rights. Because states have to be accountable. Communities are no longer begging for the rights, but they can tell the countries, the states, that they're accountable for implementing and fulfilling these rights. And basically, this is all that is about. The decade is about people of African descent fully enjoying all human rights guaranteed to them by international law, and in cases in which these rights were violated, as it happened under enslavement, colonialism, and National Socialism and apartheid, the decade demands, rightfully so, the recognition of these injustices and the rehabilitation of the dignity of the victims and their descendants. Now I wish to make the switch to why we are here today. We are also here today to launch, but the International Decade has a clear demand for data collection on people of African descent. And I wish to quote the paragraphs 13 to 15 of the program of activities. It says that in accordance with paragraph 92 of the Durban Program of Action, states should collect, compile, analyze, disseminate, and publish reliable statistical data at the national and local levels, and take all other related measures necessary to assess regularly the situation of people of African descent who are victims of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. Paragraph 14 says, such data should be disaggregated in accordance with national legislation upholding the right to privacy and the principle of self-identification. And paragraph 15 continues, the information should be collected to monitor the situation of people of African descent, assess progress made, increase their visibility, and identify social gaps. It should also be used to assess and guide the formulation of policies and actions to prevent, combat, and eradicate racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. And yet in Germany, it was not until the Afrozensus in 2021 that we had the first ever survey on the discrimination of people of African descent in German history. And I think we can applaud for that. And on behalf of the advisory board for the implementation of the International Decade for People of African Descent, I wish to say thank you to each one teach one. Thank you to all team members who made Afrozensus a reality. Thank you for all partners, for the funding agency also, to make the people of African descent and their realities visible. And thank you for showing victims of discrimination that they matter. And I could say much more about the Afrozensus, but there are people who can do this much better than myself. We have heard two of them. But I'm also looking forward to now having an exchange with members of the Afrozensus team and invited international guests to learn more about the story and vision of the Afrozensus and how it relates to the social movements of people of African descent in other European countries and in the international human rights agenda. Without much further ado, I wish to welcome our panelists first to the stage, and then I will introduce you. So we have Muna Anissa Aikins. She's a social scientist, lecturer, and consultant with a focus on racism, health, development, and social justice. And as co-coordinator of the Afrozensus research project team at Each One Teach One, she co-led the communities-based research aimed at understanding and quantifying experiences of Black people. Currently, she's pursuing a PhD in psychology at the Max Planck Institute for Human Development, and Aikins studies the impact of racialization on health outcomes. Welcome. Next to her, we have Teresa Ellis Bremberger. It's right? Or do I say Bremberger? Bremberger. It's okay. Okay. She's a research associate and co-founder at the newly founded BPOC-led and owned Centrum für Data-Driven Empowerment, Leadership and Advocacy, in short, CEDELA. Previously, she worked as a research assistant at DeZIM on the project Diversity in the Federal Administration and at Citizens for Europe in the section of Vielfalt entscheidet, Diversity in Leadership. Teresa is a co-author and was co-project lead of the Afrozensus. She holds a degree in economics and social sciences from the Humboldt University of Berlin and is certified social justice and radical diversity trainer focusing on anti-racism and gender equality. Welcome to you too.
Thank you.
Then we have Ariam Tekle, who is a producer, broadcaster, and emerging director. She fosters a particular interest in foreign policy and studies in the diaspora. In 2017, she directed Amputamento ai Marinai, a documentary about Eritrean second generations in Milan. In the last couple of years, she focused on the production of Black Coffee, PDC, a podcast she co-created with Emmanuel Maréchal. The project is an archive of interviews and conversations with people from the African diaspora whose work broadens the narrative around Black communities in Italy. And Ariam is also the founder of the Blackness Fest, a 3-day festival designed to explore, celebrate, and connect the African diaspora in Italy. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
And special welcome to Berlin and Germany. You had a long way to us. Then we will switch now to the screen because we have Mila Paspalanova here representing United Nations Human Rights from the Regional Office for Europe. Mila Paspalanova is doctor in social and political sciences from the Catholic University of Leuven. She has served for 16 years with the United Nations, first with UNHCR in Mexico, and then with where she was in charge of implementing ONCHR indicators framework in Mexico and numerous Latin American countries in the design of human rights policies and monitoring human rights. She is also an expert on public policy, human rights indicators, and measuring the level of implementation of human rights. And I'm informed that now at the Regional Office for Europe, she's especially responsible for monitoring and also progressing the fight against racism and racial discrimination in Europe. Welcome to you too. So I will now join the panelists. Shortly, I'm researcher in law and have done research on the discrimination of Black communities in Germany. I currently work for the National Racism Monitor at the German Research Center for Integration and Migration. And I'm a friend and supporter of Each One Teach One, long-standing, and so happy to be here with all of you and to now join into our discussion. So following our round of introduction, I would like to give each one of you the opportunity to give us a statement from your personal or professional background or experience regarding the issue of data collection in the context of racism and racial discrimination. And we can start with you, Teresa.
Thank you. So I think I already touched on some things a few minutes ago, but thank you for introducing me. I am a research assistant at the moment at ZEDELA, as mentioned before, and like one of the challenges we faced during the Afrozensus was that not many organizations in Germany collect data on anti-discrimination and equality. And even less organizations are BPOC owned and led in this context. And one side outcome of the Afrozensus was also that part of the team founded this new organization, which is BPOC owned and led. And together we bring a lot of experience on collecting equality and anti-discrimination data to the table. So I will speak on behalf of ZEDELA in this statement. So our take on the significance of the issue of data collection in the context of racism and racial discrimination is that who is not counted does not count, meaning that it stands for the essence of the struggle for racial equity and justice, since in Germany we have a diverse society. However, this diversity is not always reflected in institutional structures. So particularly concerning ethnic and racial discrimination, statistical data has historically fallen short and often only being represented by the, and this is really specific for the German context, migration background. Like it's a statistical measure which measures the migration background but is often used synonymously for racist discrimination or being a racialized person. And even though the concept itself, it was a step forward when introduced in 2005, it clearly has its limitations because it only captures the first and second generations of migrants. And it also disregards thus groups that have been part of German society for generations, such as the Black community, Sintize and Romnia communities, and so on. And moreover, it fails to differentiate whether a person is racialized or not, leading to oversights like categorizing a white person from Sweden under the umbrella of migration background, but clearly this person doesn't experience racial discrimination. And despite the German government acknowledging certain groups as particularly affected by racial discrimination, such as Black people, Jews, Sintize Romnia, Muslims, or Muslim perceived individuals, it has not fully committed to collecting specific data to combat discrimination against these groups. And as I mentioned, or we mentioned before, the excuse often cited is Germany's Nazi past, where race-based data was weaponized for persecution and extermination of people. Yet we must recognize the paradox. Those not accounted for remain invisible in the eyes of policy and decision makers, and this failure to accurately represent our society in data is a breach of Germany's human rights obligations. So it is imperative that we collect data to address the glaring gaps in representation and tackle discrimination effectively. However, data collection should not be an end in itself. It must be accompanied by meaningful action and community involvement. Data collection methods should be compliant with data protection regulations and be designed in collaboration with and for the affected communities. Therefore, the Equality Data Initiative has developed 6 core principles, I touched on that earlier, for anti-discrimination and equality data, to which a 7th has been added through consultation with the Sintize and Romnia community in Germany. The 7th principle is the principle of no harm. In other words, the data must not harm the communities. In conclusion, if we are truly to confront racism and achieve racial equity, we must recognize that those who are not counted are marginalized and silenced. Data is one necessary tool for interventions and policies, that dismantles systemic racism, and this is what Zedela ultimately strives for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Teresa, you want to continue? No.
Thank you. I think we all agree on most of the points. Thank you very much. Yeah, as already mentioned, I'm part of the Max Planck Research Group, Biology, Social Disparities and Development, and my focus did not shift from community-based research, but more like the institution where I'm doing this kind of research. I worked for 8 years at Each One Teach One. This is so partly home for me, and yes. And when we did the Afrocensus, it was really hard to handle that, or for me to take personally, that we have so limited data on the effects of racism on our development and our like how we embody also our social experiences. And that's why I decided to go more into health research and to also pursue the PhD, because I think it's important to talk about how racism looks like and what ways racism also is taking and so on, or people are being racialized, but also to talk about the impacts it has on us. So yeah, but if you go to from black community structures like EO2 to a white institution, it's very hard to negotiate like how white structures, in this context academic structures, can fulfill the same principles we have. And me coming from a community work, it's like it's challenging, but I think it's also important to also emphasize that our regular structures need to change. And so yeah, in general I would say it's, for me, it's important in both contexts, like in a white structural setting as well as in a community setting, that we do research which is not serving elites alone, like the elites, and especially also within our black communities we have certain elites, and it's very important. There was also the question, who do we center and so on. And also when we have data like the Afrocensus data, like to facilitate the knowledge transfer, to use the data for actions, and also to build our own structures and to engage with like the white structures which are there. So for me personally, I'm still trying to be actively shaping and cultivating spaces for our very diverse communities, and that it has a meaningful outcome for us. And yeah, and what is in terms of data, what's important to me is, I already mentioned that while we were presenting the Afrocensus, that it is like that we take different sources of data, different sources of knowledge, that we respect qualitative data which has been like gathered for decades and centuries and so on, but also try to quantify certain experiences, to give the emphasis, like to put emphasis on that things need to change, that they can't stay the way they are. And especially that these research agencies also are placed within communities. So we can't just give like our experiences, or we can't consider black people as carrier of data, like, and then we take the data and then we don't even know where it's then going or what's going to happen to it. So to also have to keep being focused on the accountability, and yeah, to have a critical analysis of our own responsibility and standing and so on.
So thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation. I will start with yeah. I apologize for my English. I hope it's understandable. But let's start like from that. Thank you. And yeah, I don't know if I'm going to surprise you, but in Italy we don't have any data at all on black experience in Italy, in the Italian context. And but we feel the need to do something also from our dimension, from grassroots movements, and we tried last year, maybe 1 year and a half, and we did a questionnaire. But it's so essential for me to be here to learn from you, because we face a lot of odds from the start, from the beginning. When you said about the first question on how you identify, I think we passed hours or days around this the first step. My experience on data is limited to this experience, but as you mentioned in my introduction, I start thinking about the Italian context and how our stories and experiences are narrated from the mainstream media. And it was I don't know if you know that the Italian law on citizenship is not changed like in the last 30 years, and people that are born in Italy don't have access to the citizenship until when they are 18 years old. So 10 years ago, more or less, they started this campaign to change the law. But the problem to me, it was that they were using identity to justify the right to have the citizenship. So I was like a bit confused about this narrative, because it didn't take into account all the nuances, that the complexity that when we talk about identity is something personal, individual, and many factors influence your identity. And in this campaign, we were seeing Italian, like black or racialized kids justifying their right to have this citizenship, saying how much they were Italian, how many times in a week they were eating pasta or stuff like that. So that was the starting point for me to collect experience from older generation than me. So the Eritreans were raised in Milan in the 70s. And then I realized that in Italy we don't even know what is the racial profiling. Now we are talking about collecting data, but it's a huge lack of knowledge, and we are trying to to share our thought, a lot of us also study outside Italy, abroad, and meet other activists or researcher, and this is so essential for us, because it's when nobody talk about something, as you said, it's like it doesn't exist. But and then I found it with Emmanuel Maréchal Black Coffee. So we have now 100 of episodes with it's like informal chat about our experience, but it's important to talk about our story as our individual story, and not representing all monolithic category, but also this allow us to see the common point, and highlight how the system works. And yeah, I'm done.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. Can you hear me well? and I will pull some experiences from also what we heard during the past 48 hours. It's finishing today in the European Parliament. And of course, a lot of the discussion is about data. And I will also be touching, you will let me know how much time I have during the different slots for our participation. I will be touching upon the main arguments of why we should proceed forward, and also the obstacles that we are seeing, why EU member states are not advancing with something that is, in fact, an international obligation. And you were asking us also to start with a little bit more personal note. I came to this field of work from clinical psychology and neurophysiology, and the way of life, and I was born in Eastern Europe, communist Eastern Europe, and I was going where the scholarship was for my studies, as it has happened probably to many of you, and it was about quantitative analysis and statistics. That's how I finished working in the realm of statistics, and eventually life brought me to the measurement of human rights and measurement of human rights violations. So coming from a background of probably 17 years of establishing monitoring and statistical systems on human rights with integration of all cross-cutting principles, which include not only data disaggregation by all ethnic and racial categories that we have to include in statistical systems, but also developing additional indicators and establishment of the administrative registries in institutions, particularly justice administration, prosecution, police forces, and then in the areas of economic, social, and cultural rights, no, in multiple countries. And one first experience that I would like very much to share with you is that independently on what the international recommendations of countries are and obligations, and if you allow me in a second, I will share with you some striking data on what states in the, well, EU member states have been receiving as recommendations by treaty bodies. Independently on what international obligations are, we all know that states are not implementing their international obligations, and even less are implementing those that have to do with data, unless, and this is what we discovered in Latin America, unless there is some very foreseeable benefit for the institutions. And unfortunately for many states, international shaming or receiving recommendations or receiving communications by special procedures is not sufficient argument for them to advance with collecting data. I will go now briefly to the data. Please interrupt me when I'm taking too much of the time allowed at this moment. I was just screening and presenting during the Anti-Racism Week some data on the international recommendations formulated to the 27 new member states. I have not disaggregated them by states for not rubbing off some vulnerabilities. This information is public. Everybody can search at our databases and see which are the different countries receiving different recommendations. But only the Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination has formulated nearly 2,500 recommendations on this. And most of those refer to people of African descent. Okay? And then on Roma populations, and then on racialized Muslim communities. Then to those if we had all the treaty bodies, not only the CERD, but we had the CEDAW, the Human Rights Committee, and so on and so forth. We had the 9-4. The number goes nearly to 4,000. And if we had all treaty bodies and special procedures and QPR, we go almost about 9,000 recommendations. And probably around 20% of those have to do with data and statistics. So 27 new member states have consistently received recommendations that they have to generate those data, not only at the level of National Statistical Institute, but also at the level of administrative registries. Okay? And this is not being done. And one of the arguments that we have been encountering consistently in Latin America, and I really hope this cross-continent dialogue and exchange of experiences at certain moment can be strengthened, is on one hand the lack of, leaving aside political will, the lack of knowledge and understanding. What does it mean to collect data and to produce statistical information? And that case data, or collective that has been victim of human rights violations is completely different than having statistical information. So the argument about protection of personal data that usually governments and institutions give in order not to advance with producing reliable statistical information is in fact invalid. No? So there we have to be strengthening knowledge, understanding of what's the difference between case-by-case data and developing statistical systems and statistical information. Then at a very personal level, like the level of the person who is administrating justice, no? The judge or the magistrate or the judicial secretaries or the doctor in the health system who is the first responsible for collecting, for example, information on cases of violence against women in racialized communities, is the argument that my job is not this. My job is to administer justice, or my job is to treat the patient, but my job has nothing to do with collecting data. No? So these are the very, very obvious arguments that professionals are giving. And what is left completely aside, what we discovered here in the EU arena, is first, the reference to international obligations, as I was saying, and I keep on coming back to this, because here is one very key component that reminds us who is responsible for compliance with international human rights standards. These are the states. It's not civil society, it's not the collectives, it's not the UN, and usually it's us taking over the task of collecting data. No? And this again leaves kind of the responsibility of the state a little bit diluted. So at the EU arena, what we discover is that the EU Anti-Racism Action Plan, which is an amazing framework, is not built upon assessing data sources that come from the international sphere, from civil society. It's not fed by any other information that does not come by Eurostat or the Fundamental Rights Agency, which is not that source, but you all have read it, and each one of you who works in statistical field knows what the limitations of those sources are. Okay? And then we have, since 2008, per petition of the states, it was not invention of the UN, it was per petition of the states, elaborated the methodological framework on developing human rights indicators, which again hasn't been lowered at the level of national public policies or EU Anti-Racism Action Plan. Later on, it's referenced in documents that stipulate how the plan has to be implemented, but at the core of the instrument, all this framework is left aside. So I think I will stop here at this moment. I hope this was sufficient as an introduction, and then we keep on entering in the details of what comes from those frameworks and how we can probably advance. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mila, for your statement. And I wish to just take a stand for Mila. Mila, I have worked at the UN regional office before you, so we haven't met in Brussels. But I remember that whenever I would even promote the International Decade coming from the UN background, even with communities, you know, you dropped some very key wordings where we had workshops to understand what this meant, right? So just to say, I understand that some of this wording is very technical, but it's very important wording, because these are crucial treaties, but also crucial frameworks at the UN level and also European Union level, where actually decisions are being shaped. And it's also important, this is what I kept stressing, that communities, we as civil society and researchers actually do engage in those regional and international frameworks. So thank you very much for giving us the context, but also letting us know actually what member states struggle to do, what their fulfillment should be, and actually what they do not decide on international level, because this is also important to know. For example, in the context of racial discrimination, what does Germany adhere to in the General Assembly of the United Nations versus what it says as a government? It's very important. So we had your statements. Thank you very much for that. I want to start maybe as an as an avenue for us to discuss, and you can all jump in, so it's not a question to a particular person. Teresa, you have also mentioned, for example, this argument which comes from the German government for decades, that we don't want to repeat history, and this is why there is no data collection based on the category of race, because the National Socialists have misused this. And now we also hear now from you, Ariam, that actually in Italy there is no such thing as talking about blackness so much, right? But at the same time, when the citizenship law is into question, then people have to justify, this is what I noted down, people have really to justify the Italianness in this society. So, and how could this even be without race being an issue, that others with a different color in the background have to justify that? So maybe just as this, first question, is it not also about shaping narratives, about telling the story of Germans, telling the story of Italians from different perspectives, diverse perspectives?
I don't know anything about the Italian context, but I just wanted to highlight from a German perspective that I really understand when you say, like, you want to talk about racial profiling and people don't know what you mean by that. So it's also like, how do you ask your own people the race question? How do you ask your own, like, your racialized communities? How do you ask them about race if race is like denied to be having an effect and existing in this world? And I think in a German context we really can build on the work, and that's why what we tried also to emphasize in the Afrozensus, that we're on the shoulders of giants, meaning also the work, the initiative for Black Germans and ADEFRA, Afro-German women, have been doing for decades in this country, and also many other movements and groups. And we have been also talking about racist police violence and so on today. So yeah, it's like, it's also this it's very important, as you said, shaping narratives, like build your own narratives, because what racist narratives will tell about you is wrong from the beginning. So that's the whole idea of race or racism, and it's very important. And I remember Fatima Al-Taib emphasizing this, like, you need to have words for what is happening, you need to have understanding of what's happening, to also say that's wrong that it is happening. But if you can't name it, it's very difficult to even have a story of it, or to share the experience while it's happening. And that's also a common thing what racism does. It isolates people, and it makes it about themselves, like it makes it about us, not like being enough, or not being something being wrong with us, and so on. So it's a collective effort to shift this, like, also negative vision on ourselves, which is already very hard to change in our own narratives. And that's why we need the community. So as Audre Lorde also put it, there is no liberation without your community. And that's what I feel in a German context, that we have been building this, and many other before us have been building this, so we can name these things and say, okay, this is racial profiling, and this is police violence, this is also structural violence, also moving from this, as you said, identity, to talk about social positions. And we put into social positions, we are labeled certain way, we're treated a certain way. It's not like we have something to do with it, it's happening to racialized communities. And yeah.
Yeah, about the Italian context, starting from the idea of identity, I think it's very difficult to deconstruct this idea of the Italian identity, because if we have really to look at when this idea was born is something that Italian never faced, and is the colonial period. So when the Italian unified, they start to look at the African country, the one left, and they need a narrative. They need something to justify sorry, this intention to go abroad and use other countries and other people work, and so they need to have also as how it start the racial theories, right? To justify something, to justify the economic system, right? The same was for the Italian identity, and this is the main, I think, but they are not nodding. The Italian people here, so maybe I'm right. The main difficulty is to deconstruct this idea, because Italian white people if they do that, they have to face the racism that they interiorized during the centuries. Yeah, I'm lost, but okay.
You want to add on this?
No, I don't.
Okay. Mila, do you want to add on this first question? Yes, please.
Yes, please, thank you very much. I was looking for the little camp in Zoom and I couldn't find it. I wanted to add a couple of topics, and again, since I don't have very direct visual contact with you, I let me know if I'm taking too much time. And yes, Suzanne sends you a lot of greetings.
Thank you.
Suzanne Bosman. Yes. Now, going back to the topic, on the importance of measuring and naming things the way they are. On one hand, we can say, or we have really to think, why do we want to measure more and more? Why is such a body of recommendations existing there? Why do we have every time more and more seminars and workshops on this topic? And you measure, it's not for the purpose just of measuring, it's for the purpose of changing reality. How do you change reality? Ideally, you should be able to change it through public policy. And here we come to the topic of financing. No public policy, and this is a big problem with all the anti-racism, equality strategies at the national level. Those do not form part of the core public policies in the countries. They do not have budget. They are not compulsory for their implementation. No, there is no normative obligation to implement them. Now, to put this a little bit more in practical terms, no, if we take the recommendations and we see what the problematic is, and everybody here in this room, and today and yesterday in the week on fighting against racism, we're convincing ourselves against those who are convinced. We know what the issues are, no? And counting more and more people does not necessarily will convince policymakers that they have to make more work, no? The topics have to do, and I will come now on a practical example of probably how we can keep on shaping better our arguments. You were mentioning just a couple of minutes ago in the first round of questions the topic of health and mental health. And it's one of the topics on which we are working very much since last year on understanding how racism shapes health outcomes, physical and mental health outcomes. Somehow we are forgetting that in the definition of the right to health, there is a component of mental health as well. So that's where we need the data in order to shape public policy, in order to shape the health policy, in order to shape the responses for support centers for people who are victims of trauma or complex trauma. Giving another example, racism and health, and how are we going to implement international obligations that have to do, for example, with the cultural adaptability of health services. And here we are entering in the whole area of traditional medicine, no? And for this we need the data in order to shape policy and in order to come with adequate resources for supporting it. One last example I will give again from the health sector. I was very surprised to hear from a colleague from DG Somtech here that the AI model, which was probably, you know this, excuse me if I'm repeating something well known for you, the AI model that was that is used for testing and screening people for skin cancer, not surprisingly, was tested on white people. And of course, it's under detecting skin cancer in people of African descent. I mean, those are the implications, probably for which we have to think, in which we have to think in a stronger degree in order to push forward the construction of statistical systems. And one completely different example, and I will stop at this point, is the situation of giving follow-up of those horrendous colonial legacies of the separation of the Métis children. The last case of separation was in 1964. We kids separated, and there was a Belgian resolution. I think Germany was almost not involved in those cases, but Belgium, France, and a couple of other countries, yes. So archives were brought here, where in theory, every person of African descent who has a suspicion to be a victim of those separations can go to consult them, but there is no information anymore. There is absolutely no requirement on the follow-up of who went, which archives were consulted, how many people managed to recover their links with the country of origin, with their mothers, with their fathers. No? So going back to the practicality of the use of statistical information and back to the obligation of the state party to collect it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much also for you. And Mila, you mentioned 2 points which I also want to continue building on. You mentioned first the issue of finances, which is very important. And also, of course, you keep reminding us about the obligations, the state obligations in the international human rights system. I want to ask now the colleagues who worked on the Afrozensus, Muna and Teresa, when we talk about, because even when we talk about empowerment and anti-racism, finances also have to do with equity and equality, and actually the lack of finance can be an indicator exactly for marginalization, because there is no funding for particular areas. And as people know who are in public policy, what is not written in the plan, in the budget of a nation, is actually not really going to happen, although people declare it. So what has been your experience on this issue of finances, budgeting for equality data? Although we have the Afrozensus, would you say there was a shift actually in this direction, or are we now back at the situation where actually more advocacy has to be done to enlarge the Afrozensus or similar projects?
Good. Like I mentioned before, that even the Afrozensus, and thank you to the Federal Agency of Anti-Discrimination for the money, and I think you gave us the budget you could have given us, but even the Afrozensus was underfunded, and it had like this clear focus on raising collecting anti-discrimination and equality data on racism and racial discrimination. And I feel like that there was this phase where you could raise some budget for this specific purpose, but if you go further, like also we told about how we want to go further, like also shifting the perspective from what are we experiencing to what are we creating, what empowers us, and so on. Like how I see it, there's still no budget for empowerment, and this is the point where we have to ask ourselves, like, who's benefiting from certain finances and budgeting? Like, what's the interest behind financing certain projects and not financing others?
I agree.
Yeah, it has been, and it is always more a community investment and a community effort. So it's not a state or publicly or dominant structures which would just give you the money you need. Even if you tell them what do you need it for, it is very difficult to convince and get the needed amount to. And then if you even have to prove with the funding you get that racism exists, it's like, where do we go from there? It's so it's very limited within the structures which are there. And I also think that communities such as the Roma and Sinti communities, as well as Black communities, and especially refugee communities, do a lot of work which is not funded. And then when we put things on the agenda, on the public agenda, then others get the money for it. So I think that's also a problem, which interests are being served, and how is this also in this system filtered by the system, who gets the funding, who gets the money, when the urgency is clear, when the pressure was enough, and there is being some money provided. So I think we also need to build within communities processes to also share different powers we get. So it's like, I think that's also quite limited, but it's also hard to do the work intersectionally within your communities while you have to do it on a structural level with dominant white structures. So I think it's very challenging.
Thank you. And Ariam, where do finances come into play in your work, the work you do, the work you do in your community?
So, yeah, what I experienced since I finished university is discover how cultural dimension and also political dimension is so exclusive. And then for example, to do a documentary or to do the podcast or a festival is not easy. It's not because there are many events or moments or spaces, but many of the people work there are volunteers, and with my project, I'm trying in this small dimension. I'm trying to change this approach, and for me, it's very important to find the funds to pay all the workers because they are workers, and also to pay the people that contribute in the talks or with the exhibitions, because I think it's a common belief that we can. Okay. So yeah, I don't have much to say about that because I try to find funds from a European level. I think it's more accessible, but also the application are understandable more than the Italian. And Yeah, also the problem is that when you talk about races without talking about class, it's like you are selling an idea, but behind that there is nothing concrete.
Thank you very much for your experience, and I think, personally speaking, it's shocking that you say there is no public funds accessible for initiatives like yours, you know, for important topics as yours, and that you actually have to go the extra mile to look for regional funding, and which also means, and this is something also we talked a lot about the Afrozensus in terms of experience. Discussions like this can never really transport the emotional labor and the physical labor of communities necessary to actually for us all to sit here in such a space. So we can never transport it. So I don't know what I can now do, but I would really like to acknowledge you and the work you do in Italy in these conditions. Thank you so much. And Mila, I saw your hand. I wanted to have this round first from a community perspective, because these are challenges, of course, which are informed by the experience of communities, but I also wanted also to take this opportunity because I know you are also, of course, here. United Nations employees are never not in United Nations police, so we know you are also taking note, and that you can also use what you are hearing, especially also for your other rounds in narrating the experience of communities. The same goes to our colleagues here who are here from governmental institutions or from equality bodies. But where I would like to take you in, Mila, now is for the next question, because you shared that actually, despite 9,000 recommendations having been shared for a long time to member states, European Union, but also United Nations member states, 20% of these recommendations being alone about statistics, still there is not a lot of political will or progress seen for this implementation. And you also said naming and shaming is not doing a lot. And you know, I'm a former senior fellow of the United Nations Human Rights Office, and one of the key principles which was taught to us was like, you have to call out your state, you have to name them. This is one of advocacy policy statistics, right? Tactics. But now you tell us it doesn't even help to call the states out. So from your perspective then, and you made it very clear, you said states will not move about data and statistics if they don't see a benefit for it. Can you maybe elaborate or share with us a bit strategically, how can one make states see the benefits for data collection?
Yeah. I will try, and I will give you one example. And I know that in a European context, it's very difficult to digest examples that come from Latin America, and also the other way around. No, and about the naming and shaming. No, we do our due share of naming and shaming. Just that the information on the 27 is so abundant, and it's so publicly available that usually during those presentations, I don't make the disaggregated pointing out of which country has received how many, on what topics, no? But before continuing, opening parentheses for all of you who are interested from civil society or other actors, I don't know, unfortunately, who is there present and following us, if we can support through either sharing information or capacity building or sharing information on documents, frameworks, obligations, please reach out to us. Angelo, colleagues, share our data. Now, one thing that I would like to remind before giving a particular example that has worked very well for us in Mexico, and that's how it was ignited the big part of the rest of the continent, well, South America. I would just want to remind something. There is something called human rights-based approach to policy that states know, but of course it has to be reminded what does it imply. Okay, and part of what human rights-based approach to policy implies is first having participation, civil society, academic, expert participation at all stages of policy development, including from assessment, drafting, implementation, monitoring, evaluation. And the same implies about using available data from alternative data sources, not only from our national statistical institutes or Eurostat. Okay. So on this, I think, based on what human rights-based approach to policy means, and it has been retaken by the Commission in one of the policy guidelines on the implementation of the EU anti-racism plan, they make reference to it, but it's still us who have to remind this framework what it implies to the to states. Now, what is one of the very big risks that we always see when too much effort is invested in civil society producing data, that we are taking away the obligation outside of the hands of the state. And the moment when civil society, doesn't have the funding to continue with collecting this data is not going to be collected anymore. So eventually we have to find a way to shift towards identifying one or two leading institutions in one state, and here I'm coming to the example, to see the benefit of counting with data, also breaking some of the prejudices related to data and to protection of personal information, and basically refuting the argument that everything will go terribly wrong if we start collecting data. And the example that we found, the exercise started back in 2009 in the judicial power of Mexico City, which is probably the biggest court, let's say, worldwide, over 500,000 cases per year, 20,000 judicial decisions dictated per year. That's a huge, huge institution, serving over 20 million people. So what happened there is 2008 back, they had the judicial book, which is like the paper book with the columns where you write number of cases, what is the decision, sentence, condemned to prison, how many years, everything was written by hand. There was not even a statistical division, nothing. And we go with our human rights indicators framework to implement it there in the context of existing human rights action plan. What the court was living in this moment, of course, we arrived in the right political context. That's why it's very important to find the adequate institution where you can develop one administrative registry. What the court was facing as the biggest challenge is, and I think here is the same case, over representation of cases in the penal aid. Criminal law. So justices really could not handle the amount of cases that they had there. And of course, they were incurring in judicial errors, non-compliance with judicial terms, just because one judge had to handle over 70 cases per month, which is practically impossible to do. So once a statistical, it's at another moment, that's why I'm offering to share this know-how in more depth. What through the human rights indicator systems was achieved is really to provide the argument to the legislative power who is funding the court doesn't generate their own funding, their own budget, on why it should be invested in the systems of mediation and alternative justice administration and promotion of using of alternative sources of conflict resolution, which at the end of the day resulted in 80% of decrease in criminal cases, compliance with judicial terms, and better administration of justice. Like the shift only in the course of 2-3 years of the functioning of the court was radically changed. And then we have very well also established the number. How much did it cost to the judicial power to establish statistical systems, statistical directorate, the computers, the cables, everything that is required in order to do this. And we were working it together with UN Women, us, National Statistical Institute was supporting Ministry of Interior. The cost, more or less calculating from Mexican pesos, was about $500,000. So when you think it at the scale of one justice administration institutions, $500,000 are, honestly speaking, is not a lot of money to establish something that in the long term reduce costs, reduce workload, improves administration of justice, and on the top of this, all ethnic and racial communities are recorded in statistics, plus the way we establish the supervision and the validation methods for assuring that there is no voluntary or involuntary mistakes when recording the data. No? So this is something that eventually we have to find a way in Europe, any country, I don't know if Italy is going to be the ideal case, in any country with one institution that is sufficiently open to establish the best practice. And I'm thinking, which example can we take? It can be even at municipal level. It can be in the area of health, not necessarily justice or police functioning. In the so-called human rights cities, there is a whole network of human rights cities that has complied to human rights-based approach and human rights-based approach to data. So I don't know if this was sufficiently clear and if it contributed to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for giving the example, especially also from Mexico. And I think what it shows, and this is, I don't know what the colleagues are thinking from the German perspective already. I see, of course, a hierarchy of political interests always at hand. So already national budget, there is a lot of competition on which spheres will be funded by the national budget. And when we now then look into communities and issues like racism, unfortunately we still see that it's not okay, I have to change. It is not the top priority, unfortunately. But I like this idea of making it visible to the decision makers that something is it's costly. It's costly actually not to invest or to put money or funding into data collection. Unfortunately, we have reached the end of this wonderful discussion. We still have the opportunity, of course, to take questions, but I want now to prepare you and the panel that we are heading out to the discussion. And I wish to, in closing, to ask all of you to share with us your perspective and or vision for the future of empirically based equality, be it statistically, be it that we have more diversity, more initiatives to share, and as the launch today says, to make visible the realities of people of African descent. Yes, and how we can lead to the transformation that you envision for the work you're doing.
I think it's us.
You, in closing, what you want to leave with us for the future?
What I'm taking personally for the future, or what I learned today, is that I'm really happy about the perspective out of Italy, because I lived in Italy for a year. And I also noticed that, I lived in Bolzano, which is also very white, but I was like, a lot of black people live in Italy, but I don't really know anything about their history and so on. And while you were talking, I was like, this is quite similar to the German situation, like the denial of the colonial history, how citizenship is acquired or not acquired, the strong sense of a proclaimed German identity. And and was asking myself, like, how to, I think we have to network better. And this is why I'm also really happy about the preview or soon launch of the translation of the Afrozensus, because before, like, it was only accessible for a German audience. And maybe if we yeah, put some effort in translating stuff, being in contact, we can learn from each other and also support each other, not only in a national but also international context. So thank you.
I have the feeling that when we talk about all these topics and challenges, that in the end it is like we have to go broader, like more international and more communities involved and so on, and deeper at the same time. So that's the conclusion, that we as marginalized communities always need each other, and also to watch out for the ones who are starting what we have maybe achieved, and also to support this starting point. Yeah, and as Teresa said, like, we need to network better. So welcome, and reach out anytime so we can share what we know and what we don't know also. Yeah.
We will take Vila first.
Oh.
Vila first, you have the word now for your vision for the future. What you want to leave us with?
Vision for the future. I will base a vision for the future on something that Angela asked me to cover briefly, and I didn't do. And it's again really to not lose our strength in pushing forward the development of administrative registries. And I will touch just on two data in the second Being Black in Europe survey of the Fundamental Rights Agency. Really, and I know that many of you following and sitting there are people who work with data. And how when we start reading between the lines or analyzing the data with a little bit more psychological and sociological perspective, probably how we can find adequate argument for promoting the investment in administrative registry. To which exact piece of data I'm referring? Now, we have seen with the second Being Black in Europe, independently on the existence of policies, racism and racist incidences are perceived, racist incidences are not decreasing. And we all know that with perception data, especially when you are systematically being victim of human rights violations, you tend to internalize the situation. You underreport the situations of violence. Not discrimination. Here I'm speaking about violence. Racism is sort of violence, causing trauma. No? And this is something coming from medical research, from neurological research that hasn't made its way to public policy yet. And then when we go to the particular data of why you did not report the most recent incident of racist harassment, the most striking, well, nothing will happen, we know what the reasons are, but where I would really like to invite you to read between the lines when we think about how we can invest in administrative registries in the health sector, is when people say, well, it happens all the time. It's a minor incident. It's not worth reporting it. I'm used to it. And in most of the cases, men give this answer, women give it in less cases. And then let's think what happens when you're a victim of violence and you don't think it's important to report it or attend it. Where do you channelize it later on? Leaving the question open and guiding us to think about gender-based violence as well. And the second question, to which more women give positive response, is I deal with it by myself, with families and friends. So here you realize, and this is the type of analysis that nobody gives to the Fundamental Rights Agency survey. Now, what is hidden behind the health data and psychological impact and mental health impacts of racism on people, and how men and women cope differently with it, and how they underestimate the importance of what's going on. So that's it. Here I finish, and the way towards the future. To keep on focusing, I would rather stress on really the social areas and social implications of racism and structurally embedded racism in the institutions who are providing social services. Thank you so much. Because in the justice and security sector, much more has been done, and it's more easy to observe. Thanks a lot.
I will do a copy and paste of what you both said. So the importance of connect internationally and exchange, and also with some of my colleagues here, we were talking this morning about the importance of sharing practices and learn what you just said, learn each other, and yeah, and also the importance also to extend. Like, I'm very grateful for the invitation, but I saw the opportunity to extend the invitation to other people, because we are used to have a singular person representing all the people, but it's important also try to connect with more people and know better and go deeper and on each experience.
Thank you so much for all of you, for sharing your experiences, for sharing your visions, but also, yeah, your thought-provoking analysis also about the question of how we can make, and you said it very well, how we don't count the people, but we count the experiences of marginalized communities, and in this case of people of African descent. And I think Angelo said it before, like if the event goes well, then of course we give you the credits. And I think a key goal of today's event was really to, with the English edition, also to go beyond the national level and to have this exchange, but to also make the knowledge of the German experience of Afrozensus accessible to hopefully people like you, Ariam, and many more communities in Europe, but also to build synergies and collaboration. And I think we're starting it today. So thank you very much. So we have a few more questions left. We will open now for a short Q&A to our panelists. I will have to advise the panelists, of course, this cannot now be monologues, right, in responding. But to our participants, if you have questions, please, you can ask them now. And also, before you ask the questions, maybe for you to highlight or to think about, we are still here for an exchange. So maybe if your question goes beyond Q&A, you want to know something in depth from the participants, from the panelists, you can exchange with them afterwards. But now, please, any questions from the room? Yes, 1, 2, yes. I will repeat it. Yes, okay, please. Yes. Yeah, they will hear. Okay, for the people on the live stream, unfortunately, you won't be able to see the people asking, but you will be hearing the question now. So maybe we can start from the back, and then I saw you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for your work. I just wanted to know if will there be like an...
Can you speak a bit louder for us to hear you?
Sure, sure. Thank you so much for your work, and I would like to know, will there be an Afrozensus 2.0, like in the future, like in 10 years and 5 years, to compare the recent one with the future one? And also, will you be going like on tour through Europe or the continent in order to show what you have been working on in here? Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. Can we take the next one? Let's collect the next one. Jennifer.
Thank you very much for the work and the efforts that you have put. But mine is not more of a question, it's to kind of build on what you're talking about, that they invest on data if it is useful for them. And a good example is that how much funding was given to our countries to produce the biometric passports. And now how these passports, once you enter Europe, they are collected in the Eurodac. And once they are collected in the Eurodac, that's why now they are talking of deportations that were going to be very effective, because normally people used to say they have no passports, but now it's in the Eurodac and it's being shared across the continent, I mean in the whole of the European Union. So that's one example. But if you ask, for example, for data on how many women, for example, are in asylum homes, they will not give it to you. So I was just trying to amplify and echoing what you're talking about. They only want to fund the data when it's necessary for them.
Thank you very much. Maybe you can, is there another question? Let me take another question. Yes, please.
You said that you have taken a feminist and decolonial approach in consideration of your work, and I would like to know what were the main practical ways you think you did it. I know it's big, but
okay, feminist and the decolonial. Okay, wonderful. So let's take the two questions. We appreciate the comment of Jennifer. Thank you very much. The first question, Afrozensus 2.0.
Shall I? So I like the idea about the tour. I never thought of that. But now also speaking of Italy and other European countries, maybe that would be a good idea to connect. So we get this question a lot. We also get a lot of requests for doing presentations and at least being on tour in Germany with the Afrozensus. And this is where we come back to the main problem, funding. Like, this was a project, so we had funds for the duration of the project. And now we don't even are a funded team anymore. We work at different places. So if we do talks on the Afrozensus, it's also, it's not funded. And while we are politically on board with an Afrozensus 2.0, and it was also, this survey was designed to be repeated, we still don't know how we can implement it. So first we need the money, and then we can talk about how and when to repeat it. Do you want to add something?
We should always ask first for the money.
Oh,
Like, but the right people for the money, like for the state. I think the second question was how we implemented a feminist and decolonial approach, right? So on the first, and the one you answered, I'm not adding anything. It's what was important is, of course, that we are all Black researchers who designed the study and also connect it or link it back to community expertise and community's knowledge, which is already a race-critical context then, and also move away from this. There should be no like white gaze on Black people being, their experiences being considered, and so it is like in all kind of the instruments, items and measures we used. Also, we asked a lot of different questions about social positions, like the diversity measures we have in the survey. So also to zoom into experiences of Black women and to zoom into experiences of Black men, especially in the context of being criminalized and being in like in contact with police and judicial system and so on. So yeah, it's not like one thing where I can show you that's where it's more the concept and the content, which we also of course built on knowledge also globally from a US context and from a UK context, and also from theories, Black critical analysis, Black feminist analysis built also by German scholars. So yeah, I hope this answers the question, but if you want to know more detailed, you can also, we can also talk about it.
Thank you very much. Maybe one last. There's one. We have one from the live chat. No, we don't have one from the live chat. But just to say, live chat participants, please feel encouraged. Yes, there's one question.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elise. I was just wondering, because you mentioned that it was difficult to reach people and to let them know that they are safe. And so now that there is a result, is there a way they will get to know what happened to their data, the information they gave, what are the results, so that they know, okay, we did something, this is the result, so that they can encourage others or maybe their families, their friends in the future if there is, you know, a similar project. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
I'm not sure if I got the question. So if
yeah, maybe if I can rephrase. So it's about the way I understood you. You said there was a challenge in reaching out, also a challenge in winning communities for the participation into the survey. Now that the results are there, this is in human rights language, we call it restitution. Giving back, informing communities back who participated that this is the outcome of your participation, which that can also then motivate, encourage them to participate further in surveys.
Okay, one thing I can draw from is that we, after concluding the survey and the study, we got a lot of feedback on that. So that it's being used in bachelor theses, or I even heard of one person is doing focus groups in Afro shops and also with black women's circles, and they're taking this report and using it to discuss it, to mirror their life experiences. And I think beforehand it wasn't easy to explain what is really going to happen with the data, because we were it was us really like statistical wording, like we're going to use aggregated data and so on. And I think the best way to show the results is like read the report, so look at the results, because there you can see what it means when we said we used aggregated data. Like you can't draw any individual experiences from there, but what we stressed and what we did was to stress the community's experience and the collective experiences. And I think that doing, for example, this translation, and also if the funding would be there, opening up a next round of Afrozensus also in different languages would make it even more accessible to more people.
Yeah, I think one major outcome is the report, as you already said, but it's not that easy to access the report because it's also written in a certain language, because it's also addressing like the society and also addressing the institutions and so on. So what is necessary and what we're still trying and working on is like to make it more simpler to access it. And the English version is one of these, to have it like more accessible for people also who participated, because you could participate it in French, English and German because of the funding. We would have also loved to do it in Twi and many other African languages, but it's just also a matter of money. And also we have these fact sheets now, like to summarize certain facts, so you don't have to read the 300 pages report, to just have like some idea of what's said about Black communities and Black experiences. And at the same time, we couldn't reach certain groups, like, for example, people who are in asylum structures and so on. So it's like you need to have more resources to also offer a good setting to participate in a data collection, because for like intersectionally marginalized people, their data being gathered is not the first thing they think of. And so these are many things I think we need to take for and not just we as the Afrozensus team, but I mean in general, whoever is going to do a second or a third like data collection on the matter of also very diverse community needs. Yeah.
So thank you very much for your questions. Thank you for responding to the panel, for the panelists. We have now come to the end. We have to close. I thank you so much for your attention, for your participation. And once again, a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys, for the great panel. Thank you, Elisabeth, for moderating this amazing panel. And thank you, everybody, for coming. Before I hand over to our MD, Nadia, I just want to say what comes next, basically. So obviously, we are going to finally release the final English version very, very soon. So please make sure to just have a look on the website. Please make sure to have a look on our website, which is compat.de, but you can also check out the Each One Teach One website. It's there. The preview is already online. That's also coming, Afrozensus.de, which is also being translated right now. So the whole website will be in English as well. You can also find these things on eachOneTeachOne.com.de, which is eoto-archiv.de, I think. Yeah, so if you have questions on the specific websites, Femi is going to put that in the chat room, but also for you being here, you can always approach us and ask about the specific websites. For the German-speaking people, the fact sheets were just mentioned, which is this little orange brochure, book, mini book, whatever you want to call it, Heft in German, which you can obviously take home today if you want to. And please also make sure to just check in with us. We are going to try to make it more and more accessible. We are thinking about doing working groups towards the end of this year and so on and so forth. So hopefully there's more coming. And Magda, I'm not sure if you want to say something before we hand over.
Maybe just for your information, so the fact sheets are also available online on our website, so you can also download them there as a PDF. And hopefully the complete English version of the Afrozensus will be published in a few weeks. We will let you know, so you can read it up on our homepage. And thank you for coming.
So now it's up to me to thank you, Angelo, Magda, Femi, Morida, Rositza, for a great event and for prepping and all the hard work. It was fantastic. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to the moderation, Elisabeth. Great stuff. And thank you for having been here or being here and staying a bit. Now, there's going to be some socializing, a bit of food, which should have been delivered, well, you know, within 6 minutes. He still has 6 minutes. A bit of bubbly, because it's also 10 years EOTO. And those of you, 10 years. We're a young kid. We're a young kid. And also those of you who haven't seen the building yet, that we're in the process of acquiring and to develop that into a community center, put on that coat and walk with me. I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough. It's in the backyard here. Many of you know it already. So those of you who know it can have a bit of bubbly, hang around, or do it twice, you know. So thank you again. It was a great event. Yeah, thank you very much. See you next time. Sign up for the newsletter. Thanks.
Der ist dann gespeichert.